What is the National Hurricane Center?
Based at Florida International University near Miami. The National Hurricane Center is part of the National Weather Service. Its mission is to predict and warn of dangerous hurricanes in the Caribbean and Gulf of Mexico. The headquarters building itself is heavily fortified against hurricanes. Having 10-inch thick walls, roll-down shutters for its windows. And being far enough inland to be safe from storm surges, it is designed to survive 130-mile, 210 km per hour winds so that it can still be operational after almost any hurricane.
What is sea level air pressure?
The air pressure at sea level averages 29.92 inches of mercury, or 1013.25 millibars, MB. No matter what their elevations, weather stations calculate barometric pressures in their area according to what they would be at sea level. In this way, reports remain consistent everywhere.
Among the hail belt, what are some notable record hail accumulations?
In 1968, a storm in Illinois dumped the equivalent of 82 million cubic feet. 2.32 million cubic meters, of ice over a 620,000-acre area. Then, in 1980, a hailstorm in Orient, Iowa, left hail drifts that were 6 feet, 1.8 meters, deep.
What are major and minor ice age periods?
Of course, not all scientists agree on how to divide the periodic ice ages, with some calling for a more strict division between the times and temperatures. For example, some scientists believe a major ice age period should be defined as lasting about 100,000 years, with a 9 degrees Fahrenheit 5 degrees Celsius decrease in temperature between glacial and interglacial periods. A minor ice age period, lasting about 12,000 years with a 5 degrees Fahrenheit 2.8 degrees Celsius decrease in temperature. And a smaller ice age period, lasting about 1,000 years with a 3 degrees Fahrenheit 1.7 degrees Celsius decrease in temperature.
Where is the most humid place on Earth?
In terms of highest dew point temperatures, the extreme is found along the coast of Ethiopia along the Red Sea. Here, the average afternoon dew point in the month of June is a staggering 84 degrees Fahrenheit 28.9 degrees Celsius. Tropical rainforests the world over, of course, are known for extremely high humidity.
How did the Inca civilization experiment with climate?
In the Urubamba Valley in Peru, in a city called More, is the remains of a great amphitheater-like terrace system. Archaeologists and scientists now believe that this was a great agricultural laboratory, where each area of the terrace exhibited completely different climates, allowing the Incas to experiment with different climates and growing techniques.
Which U.S. state benefits from very favorable wind conditions.
The state of Hawaii enjoys a climate where ocean breezes naturally cool the islands, which would otherwise be quite hot because of the state's tropical location. Because of these ocean breezes, temperatures rarely exceed 90 degrees Fahrenheit, 32 degrees Celsius, and the evenings are relatively cool, even during the summer.
When was the first official storm warning issued in the United States?
Professor Increase Lapham, working with the U.S. Signal Corps, issued the first severe storm warning in America on November 8, 1870. The warning concerned a storm that was building strength in the Great Lakes.
Can you see the aurora during the day?
No, human eyes can't detect aurora during the daytime. However, the aurorae are there, and satellites that can detect X-rays, such as the POES, are able to monitor aurorae activity.
What is an ice age?
Geologists define an ice age as a period when more of the Earth's surface was covered by larger ice sheets than in modern times, or when cool temperatures endured for extended periods of time, allowing the polar ice to advance into lower, more temperate latitudes. The last ice age event, which ended about 12,000 years ago, is referred to as the Ice Age or the Great Ice Age, both usually capitalized A time, when ice covered nearly 32% of the land and 30% of the oceans.
What is a meteorite?
A meteorite is a large particle from outer space that lands on Earth. They range in size from a grain of sand on up. About 30,000 meteorites have been recovered in recorded history. About 600 of them are made primarily of metal, and the rest are made primarily of rock.
Are falling meteors and meteorites dangerous?
Typical meteors and meteorites pose no danger of any kind to people. Meteors burn up before they reach Earth, so they do not hit anything on the surface. Meteorites are so rare that the chances of their hitting anything important are almost zero. Still, occasional incidents are known to happen. A falling meteorite killed a dog in Egypt in 1911, another struck the arm of and rudely awakened a sleeping woman in Alabama in 1954. And in 1992 a meteorite put a hole through a Chevy Malibu automobile. Once in a very rare while every 100,000 years or so a meteor or meteorite about 300 feet. 100 meters, across will collide with Earth. Once in a very, very rare while every 100 million years or so a meteorite 3,000 feet. 1,000 meters across will do so, and that is a cataclysmic event.
What is a contrail?
The word contrail is short for condensation trail, and it refers to the water vapor that condenses around the exhaust of a jet aircraft flying at a high altitude. First studied during World War II, when there was a concern that contrails would give away the positions of B-29 aircraft. Contrails are now of interest to climatologists who worry about their effects on global warming. For instance, studies have shown that where contrails are present, there is an increase in the formation of more cirrus clouds. Scientists are also concerned about the other chemicals in jet exhaust that could adversely affect chemical processes within the troposphere and lower atmosphere.
What is wind shear?
Wind shear refers to rapid changes in wind speed and or direction over short distances and is usually associated with thunderstorms. Sometimes, though, wind shears can also occur as a result of a strong front moving through a region, or from abrupt changes in air mass near mountains. Wind shear is especially dangerous to aircraft, and Doppler radars at airports help to warn pilots of this threat.
If ozone is good for us, why do we hear about ozone alerts and bad ozone?
Ozone is great when it is high up in the atmosphere and doing its job of protecting us from radiation. But when it is down near ground level it is toxic to those who breathe it in. Car exhaust fumes and other sources of pollution include ozone, which is seen in smog. Ozone pollution can make people sick and damage crops. Small amounts of ozone are also produced by electrical storms. If you have ever performed electricity experiments in a high school or college laboratory, you might be familiar with the ozone smell produced by even small bolts of electricity.
What is sulfur dioxide?
Burning coal is a primary source of sulfur dioxide, so too, in the atmosphere. And so it was one of the first causes of air pollution, arising during the industrial age. Sulfur in bituminous and other forms of coal, when burned, bonds with oxygen to form this pollutant, which irritates eyes and the respiratory system. It is also a source of acid rain. Technologies have been developed that scrub sulfur dioxide emissions from smokestacks, and have done much to improve air quality. While the United States has dramatically lowered these emissions, other developing nations, such as China and India, do not impose vigorous restrictions on sulfur dioxide from factories and power plants.
How big can a raindrop get?
The laws of physics restrain raindrops from getting too large before they break up into smaller droplets. Thus, about 0.25 inches, 0.635 centimeters, is the largest a drop can get and still have the surface tension of the water hold it together.
When does the green flash phenomenon occur?
On rare occasions, as the last tip of the sun is setting, the sun may look bright green for a moment. This green flash occurs because the red rays of light are hidden below the horizon and the blue rays are scattered in the atmosphere. The green rays are seldom seen because of dust and pollution in the lower atmosphere. The phenomenon is best seen when the air is cloudless and when a distant, well-defined horizon exists, such as an ocean view.
What has recent sunspot activity been doing?
Sunspot activity during the dawning years of the 21st century has been a roller coaster ride. In 2004, it was reported that there were more sunspots on the Sun than the Earth had seen in some 8,000 years. The next year, however, there was an abrupt drop-off in sunspot activity, a trend that has continued through 2008 and into 2009. In fact, during the last months of 2008, there were almost no sunspots at all.
How far away can thunder be heard?
Thunder is the crash and rumble associated with lightning. It is caused by the explosive expansion and contraction of air heated by the stroke of lightning. This results in sound waves that can be heard easily 6 to 7 miles, 9.7 to 11.3 kilometers, away. Occasionally such rumbles can be heard as far away as 20 miles, 32.2 kilometers. The sound of great claps of thunder is produced when intense heat and the ionizing effect of repeated lightning occurs in a previously heated air path. This creates a shock wave that moves at the speed of sound.
Where do cosmic rays come from?
A continuous stream of electrically charged particles flows from the Sun. This flow is called the solar wind. It makes sense that some fraction of cosmic rays originate from the Sun. But the Sun alone cannot account for the total flux of cosmic rays onto Earth's surface. The source for the rest of these cosmic rays remains mysterious. Distant supernova explosions could account for some of them. Another possibility is that many cosmic rays are charged particles that have been accelerated to enormous speeds by interstellar magnetic fields.
Why does my nose run when I'm cold?
When you inhale cold air, it causes the mucous membranes in your nose to constrict and then dilate. This reflexive action encourages the formation of mucus and a drizzly nose. After a while, however, the body adjusts to the colder temperatures and the sniffles should stop.
A comfortable humidity level for most people is between 30 and 60%. What is a hygrometer?
A hygrometer is an instrument that measures the humidity. Italian artist and inventor Leonardo da Vinci, 1452 to 1519, is often credited with constructing the first hygrometer. His design was later improved upon by Francesco Fali, 1624 to 1685, in 1664, and Swiss physicist and geologist Horace Benedict de Saussure, 1740 to 1799, designed the first mechanical hygrometers. There are basically two types of hygrometers. 1. Dry and wet bulb psychrometers, and 2. Mechanical hygrometers. The first type uses dry and wet bulb thermometers to compare temperature changes resulting from humidity. The second type uses either organic material, blonde human hairs, which expand or contract based on humidity levels, or semiconductors made of lithium chloride, or other substances whose degrees of electrical resistance change according to humidity.
Is a polar low like an Arctic hurricane?
Some strong hurricanes such as 1992's Hurricane Andrew have continued to be active while traveling as far north as the Arctic. But at that point they are no longer considered tropical storms or hurricanes. There is also something called a polar low, which is like a small hurricane that can form above the Arctic Circle. Polar lows, extratropical lows, tend to range from 50 to 250 miles, 100 to 500 kilometers in diameter, versus tropical hurricanes that are easily twice as big in many cases. Not only are they smaller, but polar lows tend to have a shorter lifespan than southern hurricanes, rarely lasting more than 36 hours and more typically only about 12 hours. However, they can still be very intense, generating strong winds and heavy snowfalls.
What is a multiple vortex tornado?
Sometimes a central tornado can be surrounded by smaller tornadoes called subvortices or suction vortices. There can be as many as 7 subvortices surrounding the central tornado, though 2 to 5 is more common. Interestingly, these smaller tornadoes tend to be more intense, with winds spinning at about 100 miles. 160 kilometers per hour or more faster than the central vortex.
What is the driest place on Earth?
Probably the driest place on the planet is the Atacama Desert, which is located in Chile near the Pacific coast. The average rainfall here, specifically in the town of Arica, is about 0.02 inches, 0.05 centimeters. Meteorologists believe this never-ending drought is the result of the Humboldt Current, which blocks rain from reaching the Atacama Desert. There are some parts of the Atacama Desert that have not seen a drop of rain in centuries.
Because of their unusual, what was the yellow bubble lightning seen in 1991?
And Bristol, England, 2 girls playing frisbee in 1991 encountered a bizarre yellow bubble of energy. It came in contact with them, and both received what felt like an electric shock that threw them to the ground. They lost their breaths for a moment, and upon recovering, ran home and told authorities. No one ever figured out what they saw, but it might have been an unusual form of ball lightning behavior. In the past, some people have associated them with spirits or other supernatural events. Ball lightning can wander in and out of rooms, usually vanishing harmlessly, but sometimes leaving holes in windows or doors.
Is our climate changing?
Human lifespans, when compared to geologic time, are extremely brief. And so it is hard for us to imagine our planet's climate being much different than it is today. The fact is that over thousands and hundreds of thousands of years, the Earth's climate has experienced wide fluctuations, ranging from the snowball Earth of about 635 million years ago to the extremely warm conditions, 18 degrees Fahrenheit, or about 8 degrees Celsius warmer on average, than today, of a 100 million years ago when dinosaurs were flourishing. Over the millennia, there have been many periods of hot and cold. In the past, these have been caused by a variety of factors, ranging from volcanic activity to plate tectonics to the possibility of an asteroid crashing into the planet. Today, scientists fear we are undergoing a new and dramatic climactic change with one important difference: they believe humans are causing it.
What unusual floating objects have been used to help chart currents in the oceans?
In a rather humorous example of kismet, oceanographers have been taking advantage of a 1990 accident in which a Korean cargo ship accidentally dumped 80,000 Nike shoes into the ocean. Since then, whenever these shoes have been found floating in the Pacific Ocean and elsewhere, oceanographers have taken note, tracking where the accident originally occurred and comparing it with the location where the shoes were found. In this way, they were able to gather additional information about currents. It wasn't long before another accident created a new opportunity for studying the currents. In January 1992, a ship hauling toys lost part of its cargo in a storm. Nearly 30,000 rubber ducks, frogs, turtles, and beavers fell into the ocean. As with the athletic shoes, these toys, as they washed up on various shorelines, served as excellent indicators of the course taken by ocean currents.
Are some people allergic to the cold?
Research indicates that some people are, indeed, allergic to cold temperatures and may develop a rash as a result. Antihistamines can relieve symptoms, just as they do with exposure to other allergens.
Who invented the barometer?
Invented in 1644 by Evangelista Torricelli, 1608 to 1647, a barometer is a device for measuring air pressure. Torricelli was a student, for a brief 3 months, of Galileo Galilei, 1564 to 1642. And he was inspired by his mentor's observation that piston pumps can only lift water up 33 feet. About 10 meters, after which point it is impossible to pump the water any higher. After Galileo died, Torricelli continued to build on this observation. He theorized, correctly, that air had weight and, therefore, exerted pressure. He tested his theory by filling a dish with mercury. He used mercury because it was denser than water and therefore would require a much smaller amount to indicate pressure changes. He then took a 4-foot-long glass tube that was open on one end, filled it with mercury, and turned it upside down with the open end beneath the surface of the mercury. Some, but not all, of the mercury exited the tube. 30 inches, 760 millimeters, remained. This meant that the remaining mercury in the tube stayed in the tube because air in the atmosphere was exerting pressure on the surface of the mercury in the dish. Not only did this experiment prove Torricelli's theory that air had pressure, but he was also the first to create a vacuum, now called a Torricellian vacuum. The word barometer, which means weight measure, was not coined until 1665 by Irish scientist and theologian Robert Boyle, 1627 to 1691. Boyle came up with a new design for the barometer in which a U-shaped tube was used, eliminating the need for a mercury reservoir. English physicist Robert Hooke, 1635 to 1703. Made another improvement on the barometer by creating an easy-to-read dial display.
How strong is Earth's magnetic field?
On typical human scales, it is pretty weak. At Earth's surface, it is about 1 Gauss in most places. A refrigerator magnet is typically 10 to 100 Gauss. However, the energy in a magnetic field depends strongly on its volume. So since the field is bigger than our entire planet, overall, Earth's magnetic power is formidable.
How much of the Sun's energy is radiated back into space by the Earth?
As the Sun provides us with energy, it is also being reflected back into space. Because this give and take is in balance, our planet stays at pretty much the same total temperature, which is a very good thing. If Earth reflected back more energy than it received, the planet would cool, eventually becoming an ice ball. If the opposite happened, as some scientists fear could be occurring with global warming, the planet would heat up. Interestingly, some planets, including Jupiter and Neptune, radiate much more heat than they receive, which has led to speculation that there is a heat source within these planets. Some astronomers consider Jupiter a kind of failed star. If it had been more massive, it could have become a second sun, and Earth would be part of a binary star system.
What is odor pollution?
Odor pollution is simply the unpleasant stench of such things as garbage, sewage, chemicals, rotting organic matter, and hazardous waste. Human beings can detect foul odors at concentrations as low as 1 part per trillion, depending on what the chemical is. This is important because people can actually detect air pollutants, except for odorless ones such as carbon monoxide, at levels much lower than can be detected by instruments. This is especially true of the smellier pollutants, such as hydrogen sulfide, H2S, which produces that familiar rotten egg smell, even when diluted in water. Hydrogen sulfide pollution can cause everything from eye and throat irritation to asthma attacks and even death.
Which month is the most dangerous for tornadoes in the United States?
According to one study, May is the most dangerous month for tornadoes in the United States, with an average of 329, while February's average is the safest with only 3. In another study, the months December and January were usually the safest, and the months having the greatest number of tornadoes were April, May, and June. In February, tornado frequency begins to increase. February tornadoes tend to occur in the central Gulf states. In March, the center of activity moves eastward to the southeastern Atlantic states, where tornado activity peaks in April. In May, the center of activity is in the southern plains states. In June, this moves to the northern plains and Great Lakes area, into western New York. The most costly outbreak of tornadoes occurred in May 1999, when at least 74 tornadoes touched down in less than 48 hours in Oklahoma and Kansas, including an F5 on the outskirts of Oklahoma City, causing $1.1 billion in damage.
What is the difference between normal rain pH and acid rain pH?
The normal pH of rainwater is 5.0 to 5.6, while acid rain has a pH of about 4.3, compared to distilled water, with a neutral pH of 7.0. Natural rainwater is slightly acidic because of dissolved carbon dioxide, which actually makes it similar to club soda without the bubbles. Under some conditions, such as after dust storms, rain can become more alkaline, and volcanoes can add sulfur to clouds and contribute to acid rain. One extreme example of the latter happened in 1783, when Iceland's Loki volcano erupted and spewed so much sulfur into the air that acid rain killed the island's crops and polluted the air over Europe.
What did the Environmental Protection Agency, EPA, recently say about power plant emissions?
In 2004, the EPA estimated that every year about 2,800 people die from lung cancer and another 3,200 have heart attacks as a direct result of pollutants from power plants.
What are the hail belts?
Hail belts are regions that are ideal for hailstorm formation. They can be found downwind of mountain ranges, usually in mid-latitude areas.
Do turtles and frogs have antifreeze in their blood?
For a long time, it was a puzzle as to how cold-blooded reptiles and amphibians such as turtles and frogs survived in northern climes. These animals' body temperatures, unlike with warm-blooded animals such as dogs, deer, and people, plummet with the cooling temperatures. Many of them live underground near ponds and streams. As the temperatures outside cool, their body metabolism slows down, which makes it possible to survive long periods without much food, or even oxygen. Furthermore, many species of frogs and turtles have been found to use glucose compounds as a kind of antifreeze that allows their bodies to freeze without their blood and other body fluids forming harmful crystals that would otherwise destroy their tissues.
What place holds the record for the least amount of rain on Earth?
From October 1903 to January 1918, Arica, Chile, received no measurable rainfall.
What is virga?
Virga is a fancy name for rain that dries up before hitting the ground.
Who is considered one of the most important pioneers in the study of climate change?
English meteorologist and climatologist Hubert Horace Lamb, 1913 to 1997. Who founded the Climatic Research Unit at the University of East Anglia in 1971. Is considered by many to be the greatest climatologist of the 20th century. He began his career as a weather forecaster for the Irish Meteorological Office and later was with the British Meteorological Office. While there, he participated in a Norwegian whaling expedition in Antarctica from 1946 to 1947. It was during this time in Antarctica that he began to study how the world's climate must have changed. And he pursued this subject after joining the climatology division of Britain's Meteorological Office in 1954. Using records there, he researched and published papers and books about how Great Britain's climate had changed noticeably since the middle of the 19th century.
Why is it wetter on one side of a mountain range?
It's much more wet on one side of a mountain than the other. Because of a process known as orographic precipitation. Orographic precipitation causes air to rise up the side of a mountain range and cool, creating precipitation and storms. The storms deposit a great deal of precipitation on that side of the mountain and create a rain shadow effect on the opposite side of the range. The Sierra Nevada mountains are an excellent example of orographic precipitation. Because the mountains of the western Sierras receive considerable rainfall, far more than California's Central Valley, while the eastern Sierras of Nevada are quite dry.
Do other scientists believe we may be heading for an ice age?
Yes. In 2006, for example, chief researcher Kababulo Abdusamatov at the Russian Academy of Sciences said that he believed worldwide average temperatures would slowly decrease from 2012 to 2015. And then in the middle of this century there would be a much more precipitous drop in temperatures that would last for 60 years.
Why is it important to understand geography in relation to the weather?
There are a couple of reasons why geography is an important science for meteorologists to understand. One is that geographical features, such as mountains and coastlines, have an important influence on the weather. The other is that meteorologists interpret data from satellites, radar, and computer projections on various types of maps, and it is important for them to be able to visualize this data in three-dimensional space because the planet is not flat.
Has there ever been an F6 tornado?
No. Although the old Fujita scale did allow for an F6 tornado, estimating that winds up to 380 miles 611 kilometers per hour were theoretically possible, there has been no recorded tornado of that intensity. The EFS does not include an F6 category at all, and lists any tornado with winds over 200 miles, 320 kilometers per hour as an F5.
How is asthma related to air pollution levels?
Asthma is rapidly becoming one of the major health issues in the United States, especially for children living in cities. A study released by the National Institute of Allergy and Infectious Diseases in 2008 showed that asthma particularly affected children in poor, inner-city areas and that car emissions of nitrogen dioxide, as well as air particulates and sulfur dioxide, were to blame. The study evaluated over 800 children in 7 urban areas. These children had significantly higher rates of asthma and decreased lung function, which contributed to poor health and school absenteeism, even when the level of pollutants in the areas where they lived was deemed to be lower than acceptable standards set by the Environmental Protection Agency. Other studies have also shown that children have more allergies when they have been exposed to higher levels of air pollution.
What is the most rainfall ever recorded within a one-day period?
Tropical storm Claudette brought a record U.S. rainfall of 43 inches in 24 hours in and around Alvin, Texas, in July of 1979.
How much pollution is caused by smoking tobacco?
A 2004 study concluded that cigarette smoking released 10 times the amount of particulate pollution in the United States as was caused by diesel exhaust. Indoor pollution from smoking has been in the news a lot lately because the smoke is much more concentrated indoors, causing health problems even to those who refrain from the habit.
Is the National Aeronautics and Space Administration, NASA, involved in weather forecasting?
Since NASA is involved in implementing weather satellites, it obviously is very much involved in weather forecasting. NASA doesn't only concern itself with sending out manned and unmanned missions into the solar system and beyond. It also spends a lot of time observing the Earth. Weather and Earth science satellites gather information about changes in the climate, land use, and in our oceans.
What is drizzle?
Drizzle is just small droplets of rain measuring, on average, about 0.02 inches, 0.05 centimeters, in diameter.
What is the difference between snow and hail?
Snow is water vapor that freezes in clouds before falling to the earth. Hail is water droplets, raindrops, that have turned to ice in clouds.
What is a blue moon?
Once in a blue moon is an expression referring to an event that does not happen very often. A blue moon happens about once every 2.7 years when the moon is full twice during the same calendar month. The exact origin of the phrase is not certain, but it seems to be about 400 years old and comes from English roots. To say that the moon was blue would be to express that something was absurd or unlikely. Thus, the phrase did not mean that the moon was literally blue. Sometimes, however, the moon has been known to take on a bluish hue, especially when there is a lot of ash or dust in the atmosphere, such as after a large forest fire or volcanic eruption.
What is bioclimatology?
Bioclimatology is the study of the effects of the climate on living things. Weather and atmospheric conditions can affect humans in many ways, both positive and negative. Our climate affects our moods, the chemical content of our bodies, the chances of getting a disease, and more. In Europe, awareness of the importance of bioclimatology has resulted in weather forecasts that include warnings of possible health hazards. The United States has not kept up with this pace. But meteorologists in America do often warn of such hazards as air pollution and allergen levels, as well as temperature extremes that might be dangerous because of frostbite or heat stroke.
Where is the rainiest place on Earth?
The wettest place in the world, in terms of total rainfall, is Mawzinram, India, which drowns in 468 inches, 1,188 centimeters, of rain each year, mostly because of monsoon rains. Nearby is Cherrapunji, India, which receives 460 inches, 1,170 centimeters, of rain. Second place, though, goes to Tutunandu, Colombia. Here, the average annual rainfall is 463.4 inches, 1,177 centimeters. Unofficially, Lareau, Colombia, endures 523 inches, 1,328 centimeters of rain annually, but no verified measurements have been taken to confirm this claim.
What was the Great Exhibition of 1851?
Held from May 1 through 15, 1851, in London, England, the Great Exhibition of the works of industry of all nations was the first of what would become the World's Fair international exhibits. It was also called the Crystal Palace exhibit, because of the building in which it was held in Hyde Park. Among the many exhibits, the first weather map was displayed there, as well as the tempest prognosticator, a leech barometer invented by George Merriweather.
How does a lightning rod work?
Invented by Benjamin Franklin, 1706 to 1790, around 1750, the lightning rod is designed to provide lightning bolts with a safe path to ground the electricity so that it does not damage a building. Lightning rods have actually become a bit more important to have on a home or other building in recent years, because the metal pipes that used to be installed for indoor plumbing and that could serve as lightning rods are being replaced by non-conductive PVC pipes.
What is the difference between a frost and a hard freeze?
The National Weather Service issues a hard freeze warning when it predicts that regional temperatures will fall below 27 degrees Fahrenheit minus 2.8 degrees Celsius for 4 hours or more. Such a freeze is of particular concern to gardeners and farmers because temperatures this low will destroy crops. The good news is that a hard freeze usually spells the end for mosquitoes and other pesky insects for the rest of the year. Frosts, on the other hand, do not require such low temperatures. In fact, air temperatures can be several degrees above freezing, while surface temperatures are at or below freezing, causing frost to form on car windows and other surfaces.
Can groundhogs accurately predict the weather?
Over a 60-year period, groundhogs have accurately predicted the weather, i.e., when spring will start. Only 28% of the time on Groundhog Day, February 2nd. Groundhog Day was first celebrated in Germany, where farmers would watch for a badger to emerge from winter hibernation. If the day was sunny, the sleepy badger would be frightened by his shadow and duck back for another 6 weeks nap. If it was cloudy, he would stay out, knowing that spring had arrived. German farmers who emigrated to Pennsylvania brought the celebration to America. Finding no badgers in Pennsylvania, they chose the groundhog as a substitute.
What are the horse latitudes?
The horse latitudes are two high-pressure belts characterized by low winds about 30 degrees north and south of the equator. Dreaded by early sailors, these areas have undependable winds with periods of calm. In the northern hemisphere, particularly near Bermuda, sailing ships carrying horses from Spain to the New World were often becalmed. When water supplies ran low, these animals were the first to be rationed water. Dying from thirst, the animals were tossed overboard to conserve water for the men. Explorers and sailors reported that the seas were strewn with bodies of horses, which may be why the areas are called the horse latitudes. The term might also be rooted in complaints by sailors who were paid in advance and received no overtime when the ship slowly traversed the area. During this time, they were said to be working off a dead horse.
Does Alaska get hotter than Hawaii?
Strangely enough, the two states are currently tied. Hawaii, though located in the tropics, enjoys very moderate temperatures due to favorable winds and the island's topography. The mountainous parts of this 50th state can actually get very cold, and the tops of Mauna Kea and Mauna Loa receive snowfall regularly, while the average temperatures across the state of Hawaii are higher than in Alaska. The islands have fewer extremes. Alaska's interior region can get very warm indeed, sometimes reaching 90 degrees Fahrenheit 32 degrees Celsius. The highest temperature in Alaska thus far recorded is 100 degrees Fahrenheit 37.8 degrees Celsius, which was measured at Ft. Yukon on June 27, 1915. On April 27, 1931, Pahala, Hawaii reached the same extreme.
Can volcanic eruptions affect the global climate?
Most volcanic eruptions do not affect the global climate. Although larger ones can cause disruptions, albeit for a relatively short period of time. Large eruptions tend to eject gases and dust high into the stratosphere. From there, prevailing winds carry the particles around the world, sometimes with interesting results. For example, in 1815, Mt. Tamborat on the island of Sumbawa, near Java, Indonesia, erupted, putting out a record amount of ash that briefly changed the world's climate. Huge amounts of volcanic dust rose high into the atmosphere, reaching around the globe. That year, and for some of the following year, volcanic particles screened out some sunlight, causing the global temperatures to fall. In Europe and other parts of the northern hemisphere, winter never seemed to end, with frosts occurring throughout the summer. Hence, 1816 is known as the year with no summer. Scientists used to believe that cooling of the atmosphere could result from volcanic eruptions because of the amount of ash that was thrown up into the air. Now they know, however, that most of these fine particulates return to the Earth within about 6 months. What actually has a greater effect is the sulfur dioxide, SO2, that volcanoes produce. Sulfur dioxide reacts with water vapor, and the result is a long-lasting haze that blocks out a considerable amount of the sun's radiation.
How was seafloor spreading discovered?
In the 1950s, scientists realized that as igneous rocks cool and solidify, crystallize, magnetic minerals align with the Earth's magnetic field like tiny compass needles, essentially locking the magnetic field into the rock. In other words, rocks with magnetic minerals act like fossils of the magnetic field, allowing scientists to read the rock and determine the magnetic field from the geologic past. This is called paleomagnetism. The idea was proposed by Harry Hess, 1906 to 1969, a Princeton University geologist and U.S. Naval Reserve Rear Admiral, and independently by Robert Dietz, a scientist with the U.S. Coast and Geodetic Survey, both of whom published similar theories that became known as seafloor spreading. In 1962, Hess proposed the idea of seafloor spreading, but had no proof. As Hess formulated his hypothesis, Dietz independently proposed a similar model, which differed by noting the sliding surface was at the base of the lithosphere, not at the base of the crust. Support for Hess's and Dietz's theories came only 1 year later. British geologists Frederick Vine and Drummond Matthews discovered the periodic magnetic reversals in the Earth's crust, taking data from around mid-ocean ridges. Seafloor spreading areas, Vine noted the magnetic fields of magnetic minerals showed reversed polarity. The Earth's magnetic field has reversed its polarity around 170 times in the last 80 million years. From the spreading center outward, there was a pattern of alternating magnetic polarity on the ocean floor, swaths of opposing polarity on each side of the ridge. As the spreading center continues to grow, new swaths develop, pushing away material on either side of the ridge. Thus, these strips of magnetism were used as evidence of lithospheric plate movement and of seafloor spreading.
What is a Certified Consulting Meteorologist, CCM?
The American Meteorological Society, AMS, grants the title of CCM to professional meteorologists who have both broad experience in meteorology and a highly specialized knowledge of particular fields on which they intend to consult. In addition to education and experience, a meteorologist has to demonstrate professional conduct and service to be named a CCM. They are sought out by law firms, governments, law enforcement agencies, insurance companies, and other private businesses for their expertise and for the assurance that all CCMs will provide reliable and authoritative information. Only about 5% of AMS members are CCMs. The AMS provides a listing of CCMs by specialty on its website at http://www.amtsoc.org.
What are some of the highest temperatures recorded?
El Azizia, Libya 1922 136/57.5 Death Valley CA 1913 134/56.
Has there ever been a tornado in Los Angeles?
Yes, Southern California, including Los Angeles, have experienced weak tornadoes on occasion. Fortunately, no deaths have yet been reported in the state as a result. On May 22, 2008, two tornadoes touched ground in Riverside County near San Diego. A tornado warning was also issued in Los Angeles that same month, causing minor damage to homes in the suburb of Inglewood. Los Angeles County has officially seen more than 30 tornadoes since 1918.
What is the mission of NASA's Aura satellite?
Launched on July 15, 2004, the Aura satellite is on a mission to monitor changes in the Earth's atmosphere, particularly the ozone layer. Instruments on the satellite measure the chemistry and dynamics of the upper atmosphere. The data it will gather will be used to predict alterations in air quality and climate change.
What is a Campbell-Stokes recorder?
A Campbell-Stokes recorder is a device for measuring not only the amount of sunlight reaching the ground, but also its intensity. Also called a Stokes sphere, it was invented in 1853 by John Francis Campbell, 1821 to 1885. A Scotsman who was actually a Celtic scholar, his name is also cited as Ian Frangan Campbell and Ian Argyll. Using a glass sphere to focus the sun's rays. Campbell placed a card with different marks on it to indicate times. Depending on the light's intensity, the energy magnified by the glass burns the card differently. Marked cards are used depending on the season and whether one is in the northern or southern hemisphere. The name Stokes comes from the English mathematician and physicist Sir George Gabriel Stokes, 1819 to 1903. Who improved the casing, he used metal, and changed the arrangement of the glass sphere and cards.
Is it true that being hit by lightning can have health benefits?
There have been some documented cases where people who were legally blind were hit by lightning and, indeed, found out afterwards that they had regained their vision. There are also a few cases where victims of lightning bolts found out that they did better on intelligence tests afterwards. Indeed, some have even claimed that they have gained psychic abilities.
What is the National Flood Insurance Program?
The National Flood Insurance Program, NFIP, was established by the U.S. federal government in 1956 as a subsidized insurance program for home and business owners. The government began the program by creating flood insurance rate maps, firm, showing the boundaries of 100-year and 500-year flood zones. The cost of the insurance is based on the flood risk. The Federal Emergency Management Agency, FEMA, oversees the program and requires the purchase of flood insurance by any owner affected by a disaster before they can be provided with disaster assistance. This way, the next time a flood occurs, they will be insured.
Will water supplies be threatened by global warming?
There are a number of regions around the globe where populations get their drinking water from snow melting off of nearby mountains and draining into rivers. One area in the United States particularly threatened by global warming is Southern California. The snow on top of the nearby Sierra Nevadas is disappearing. And winters are not bringing the snow back as much as they once did. Los Angeles and other cities are increasingly plagued by water shortages as a result. Current estimates guess that 25% of the snowpack in the state will be gone by 2050, causing major stress on a state that has seen massive population growth. Meanwhile, drought in the southwest has caused lakes and rivers to dry up. Economic losses as a result of crop damage, livestock deaths, and loss of tourism in the region were estimated to be around $1.3 billion.
What are ocean currents?
The oceans don't remain still, their water is constantly moving in giant circles known as currents. In the northern hemisphere, surface currents move clockwise, while in the southern hemisphere they move counterclockwise. Currents help to moderate temperatures on land in places like the British Isles, which are farther north than the U.S. Canadian border, by sending warm water from the Caribbean northeast across the Atlantic Ocean to northern Europe. A current known as the Antarctic Circumpolar Current circles the southern continent. The North Atlantic and North Pacific Oceans each have a large clockwise current, while the South Atlantic and South Pacific Oceans each have a large counterclockwise current.